Hey everyone, thanks for being here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been up to the past 4 months. So my project takes me to South Africa, to Durban, in fact, which is on the East Coast. And it's East Coast city. It's incredibly culturally diverse. There's the largest Indian population outside of India. And this state is home to sort of the Zulu nation. This is where my family live. So the reason I'm here is for my grandfather, sort of to look at his sort of housing situation. Here he is, he's 82, he's 95% blind, believe it or not, on the roof. I'm, a very irresponsible grandchild, but he's a very stubborn man, perfectly able, very fiery attitude to life. And the reason that I'm here is because it's getting to the stage where, because he's been by himself and his house is falling down around him due to wood borer and other issues with the age of the property, something needs to happen, and we don't want him to go to a care home. So one of the solutions is, I'll first talk about sort of this house. It's been it's been a very big family home for us. It was incredibly beautiful back in its time. So much care and love went into its decorating, and a lot of almost pride from my grandfather. So this project was really activated by my mum. So she's very worried about my grandfather as well as her siblings, who are from time to time financially dependent on her. So we're looking to build a series of family homes, small homes, one for my grandfather as like sort of the main client, and the others for my family when they need them. So the house itself is situated in a very in the suburbs, but as you can see from here, it's very wild. There's lots of trees, and it's been overgrown. Here, looking through the site sections, you can see the retaining walls on the southern side and the western side. So there's a 4-meter retaining wall against the neighbor and a 2.5-meter against the street at the top. And you can see a slope at the bottom of the site. So here on a site model, you get an idea of the house. So here's the main house here and a series of 3 workshops that my granddad has inhabited for the last 30 years. Very quickly show you the entrance to the property. Here you can see that the house is over 90 years old. It's a colonial style house that the English built. And moving on to the back of the property, here you can see sort of looking down to like the wildness down the slope. This is sort of a very awkwardly placed box. And then on the right hand side, we have sort of the house on the right and like a large area. And looking from the other side of the house towards the entrance, this side, we have, it's a very calm area, very sheltered. The wind, nice cool breezes come through here. People actually go here when it's really hot inside the house. And on the right-hand side, this picture is sort of the alleyway between the workshops and the house, which is a very like contracted, I feel very contracted there in this place. It's not working. So onto sort of a map of the field of centres. There's a few key ones that I haven't mentioned here, sort of like these fruit trees that sort of span along the boundary wall. Sort of brings very good coverage to that retaining wall. From this area on the site, there's the only significant view out of the site, which is to a lovely church over on the following hill across the valley. And down at the bottom, it's very wild. There's sort of lots of self-seeded trees. This is sort of I put these here just as a note. Like one of the biggest challenges for me working and trying to understand the field of centres here is sort of the existing buildings. And if they're coming down because they need to come down, how can I imagine past that? So this was sort of an experiment in that direction. Moving to the project language, there's a series of patterns here at a community scale. I'll just quickly read through them. So the idea is to have a cluster of family homes, and we're looking at sort of layers of public space between these homes so that the family can have their own interdependence, and they have this idea of opting into the community space, into the family space. So this will oppose to living all in one house where it's all family space. Within that, there's sort of the property really feels like a sanctuary, and I want to continue that feeling. So for it to become a nested sanctuary within sanctuaries, and I want it to be safe and peaceful. All the clients asked for edible gardens and a food forest. And one of these patterns I've called is a wildness gradient. Sort of nature connection is very important to all of the family members and something I'd look to enhance. I'll come back to that. Yeah, when family aren't there, we're going to look to rent out the homes to recoup some of the cost of the project, and also to have homes that have space there to hire a carer for my granddad if needed. Yeah, corralling the cars, which a verb that I learned from Ross's work. So thanks for that wholesome new word. And another idea here for a library of things, sort of this shared space where they can share facilities and storage. Looking at a building scale, sort of this is more geared towards my grandfather's house, his home, is for it to be guided by the senses, so very sensual, very tactile, and like often with having light to walk towards so that he can sort of orient himself with his minimal vision. And for it to be a retirement nest, so for him to have all of his like record players, his jukebox, all these things that he's really cared for and is passionate about in his home, working. So having electricity, having good lighting, so everything just works, so he can really enjoy it. A small space for tinkering, because he's never going to stop making things. He even solders blind, which is quite scary to watch. But for all the homes to be small and cozy, and to have private outdoor rooms and private gardens. And just another one is just to favor beautiful, low maintenance finishes, because it's a low cost, low budget project. This is sort of some of the ecological design principles that I'd like to bring into the work. Just for time, I'm just going to read out a few. So having a thin plan for maximum natural ventilation, increasing thermal mass due to large day and night temperature differences, avoiding windbreaks around the buildings to keep them cool, and having correctly sized windows for daylighting, and yeah, a double skinned roof. Moving into the process, I'm going to talk here a little bit about sort of how I got started. So this is the car park area here, which makes sense so people aren't driving across the site. And then I started looking at the most beautiful places for the most beautiful private gardens on the site. So there was that one at the front, and this is at the back, where the sun comes all day. Granddad loves to sunbathe here. And just to the left of that, in this space here, the sun sets down here between the trees. And the quality of light coming through here is really beautiful in the evenings. So I put that all onto a 1 to 200 site model, and sort of, yeah, that was my starting point. I then started to play around with different volumes. And here I just added sort of units, not really worrying about the size, just seeing what would fit good, and yeah, starting to add some of the patterns to it. Here, sort of getting to a design that I like the feeling of, adding sort of the outdoor spaces, the connection, starting to build the common area a bit, adding this path down here to the wilder area, which is adding a path down to a fireplace for the family together. And this is sort of the start of this wildness gradient that I started to explore. And it was quite nice on site to be able to sort of, I couldn't mock up, stake out many of the buildings, but I could stake out this one. And immediately I got a feedback that this garden would feel nice and intimate with the view out towards the church as well. So a lesson learned here was sort of attention to detail and nuance with placing things and nuance with my movements. I started lining things up, which was going against the design. This initial feeling of when I found it as a layout that felt whole. So what I did was I traced it and sort of the initial design, and I used that as a base to work back, sort of a reference point in future designs and iterations. At this point, I took a step back, which was supposedly, which I'm now led to believe that there's no such thing as a step back in a holistic process. And the biggest point, the reason why I did this was because Chris suggested that I'd missed the central common space was the strongest center, and I missed placing that. And for me, I missed that because the house was there, and I found it really hard to sort of imagine past that. But in doing this, I actually affirmed that sort of my intuition was right, and it made sense to have that as a public space. So then I moved on. I gave that a bit of volume, sort of making sure that the wind could still come through into that space, and then added the gardens around it. At this point, I moved up to a 1 to 100 model, sort of getting a better feel for it being inside the model. And at this point, started I got a big fluorescent light, and my granddad started to see it. And this was very much a turning point in sort of the work, and he's been very on board, but he's also at times been very resistant. And sort of here, I put this picture here just to note sort of how I had a shift in thinking about conflict. And there's been a lot of conflict with my he's not, because of his vision, he hasn't been able to understand it, and it's sort of his tune changes. And what I found is civility, and paradoxically, we're actually closer than ever before now, and sort of working towards this vision of his, this vision of ours. So I looked at sort of this public space and sort of starting to develop it. Initially, I put sort of outdoor rooms at the front, sort of in the main house. There is the people meet from the neighborhood, come and meet with my grandfather outside on the veranda. So I thought maybe that we could have a large veranda in the front of these homes, and it actually felt like it encroached too much into this public space, as it was quite small in relation. So I made them a bit smaller, sort of still to have this veranda space, but just for people to meet and to chat and to encourage sort of neighborly family interactions. I put these sort of pictures in just to show this another space just off the main courtyard, which is a more intimate sort of garden, sort of quieter, more reflective, also showing the view out towards the church, and also down here at the fire pit amidst sort of an emerging forest garden. At this point, I looked at how the interior spaces related to the outdoors, and this is sort of just beginning to think about how you enter into the living space, and the living space, because it's small, is the main area, and how that extends out to an outdoor living room, an outdoor porch, and how that extends further on into each private garden. So this is a really important part of the homes for the family, and this connection to the outdoors. And then this is the final place where I got to in this process, and I added a few more centers that I strengthened. So we have down here, just before the entrance to sort of the wilder area, there's actually an arch that marks the entrance, so kind of like a portal to the wild. And just before that, there's an area for picnics and barbecues. And along the entrance from the gate, as you come out the cars, there's also a portal that sort of, not a portal, a gate that sort of signifies arriving at home. And also I put a little place to wait and to gather before leaving. Throughout this design, I tried to build this layering of space between the public realm and the private realm. So we've got little fences, gates, and then looking at how the shrubs and plants can add to that as well. So thank you all for your time and for your listening.